Hi, Drawing and Painting One. This is Mrs. Gower, and this is your demonstration video on how to finish up your remote learning shoe painting. So I have here my drawing that you guys are familiar with from the last two assignments. First assignment was drawing the shoe, and the second assignment was to add a print or pattern for the background. So you have seen this in the last two previous assignments. As you can see, I have already done something to it, and I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about just all sort of all options that you have for how to finish this off, which there are literally, it's limitless on what you could do to this. So I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible, but at the same time, I want you guys to feel free to really kind of be creative on this project, because I think with the current environment, with us being very limited on supplies, I think that opens us up to a lot of possibilities on being really, really creative with this project. So this is when I find that artists create magnificent work, is when they are actually limited on what they can do. So I'm going to talk about some of those possibilities. I'm going to show you what I'm going to be doing, and we'll go from there. Okay. So as you guys can see, I have actually already laid down some color on this. So I'm not sure if you can guess what this is, but I wanted to use a material that I thought everyone would have in their house. And it's not paint. So what I actually did is I brewed some coffee. So this is coffee that you see here. And what I did was I put it in just some bowls. I strongly recommend that you do not put the coffee that you're going to use to paint with in an actual cup, because chances are you're going to end up drinking out of it, and it's not a wise choice to drink out of the same material that you're using for your project, even though it is technically edible. So I would put it in bowls. So what I did is I have two bowls here, and I can't really show you because if I turn it, all the coffee spills out. But this particular batch, so I just made 1 cup. I made a really, really strong batch. So I'm not a big coffee drinker, so I put probably more than what I would need of coffee grounds into the coffee maker. And then what I did was I let that brew, and then I took the coffee grounds out of, kind of show this to you guys. I took the coffee grounds out of the coffee maker. I put them into the bowl, and then I poured some coffee onto it. And I've been letting this sort of sit and soak and get darker all day. So, and then this one right here, so this batch is my lighter one, and this is just straight coffee. I have no coffee grounds in this, so I'll kind of do this, see? So there's no coffee grounds in this. So this is going to be my lighter one. Now, believe it or not, as dark as it looks, coffee doesn't actually stain real dark. So that's why I made a strong brew of this. You could, if it's really dark, you could also add a little bit of water to it if it's too dark, to make it lighter. Okay. So what I did right here is I just went ahead and put just one layer of coffee down on areas that I wanted to have that brown color. Okay. And so what I did was, and I'll show you, here's my shoe. So obviously my shoe is not brown, so I am changing the color of it. So what I did was, I first initially thought, okay, I'm going to take all the parts that are gray, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint those in brown. So that's what I did up here. So that was all of this, and underneath here on the tongue. And then if you guys notice here, this part's actually pink, and I went ahead and made that brown too, because I just wanted to try to break up the sole of the shoe and find a way to pop that out without actually having to use pink. And then as far as my background goes, I decided to make my big flowers the brown of the coffee. And then you can see right here that I still need to do that to the outer part of this part of the flower. And as of right now, I'm going to leave the smaller ones without coffee on it. Who knows, I might decide later to kind of paint those in with coffee, but for right now, I'm going to leave them alone. And I'll make that decision later. So some of this stuff you'll probably kind of figure out as you go. Okay. And then as far as what I'm going to do with the other stuff, that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about on the next video that I'm going to show you, okay? So what I've got here, I've got a regular paintbrush here. Now, if you don't have a paintbrush, now this is what I did before. I wanted to test this out. is I actually used a Q-tip. So I used a Q-tip to paint a lot of this, and this is actually the Q-tip that I used. And so what I was doing, I'm going to try to get this sort of in your view so you guys can see. Actually, I'm going to. So now, when you paint, it's more natural for you to actually put your paint on your dominant hand side. So I'm right-handed. I would normally have my paint over here. Let me see. I think I can. Yeah. I'd have your paint over here on the right side. So that way it's just convenient. You're not reaching over top of your artwork to get your paint. And so what I did, because I'm actually going to use my dark coffee, and I'm not going to, I gotta be careful. I don't want to pick up those coffee grounds that are sitting at the bottom. So I'm just taking my Q-tip here, and I'm just kind of dipping it into my coffee. And I'm just going to take this. I'm going to turn my sketchbook here so you guys can see this. And I will zoom into this so you can see it better. And so what I did was then just took my Q-tip and I would keep dipping into the coffee whenever I needed more. And I just painted this on here like that. Again, just using a Q-tip. So what I found and what I thought was really interesting, I actually wasn't very confident that this was going to work. I thought it would be hard to get into some like tight areas, but I found that you could actually really control this pretty well. You just have to kind of pay attention to how much coffee you've got in the Q-tip. If you've got a lot of coffee on the Q-tip, chances are when you go to kind of lay it down on your paper, a lot of the coffee is going to go all over the place. So if you're in an area where you need to be really sort of precise, you just don't want to have a lot of coffee on the Q-tip. And then a lot of times, and this goes for those of you who were in my Fine Art 1 class, when we painted the color wheels, you guys remember when we painted in those triangles for the color wheel, I told you that when you paint that, start in the middle and then push the paint to the outside edge. That's exactly what I did with the coffee. Even though the coffee is not as thick as acrylic paint, that technique still works on this. So I start in the middle of the shape, and then I kind of work my way around. Now, one of the things you guys kind of notice on these flowers, I wanted to keep this inside. I didn't want to paint it. But as you can see with the Q-tip, it doesn't exactly have a point to it. So I didn't necessarily get all the way, I didn't get sort of around those shapes very well. But then at the same time, I thought, well, you know what? That might actually look cool. So it kind of looks like it's faded towards there. So what I thought was initially a problem is probably going to be something that's going to be a nice effect. So don't get discouraged. I'm a firm believer everything happens for a reason. So if you have a mistake or something that happens while you're doing this, find a creative way to make that work. So one of the other things that I found too with the coffee and the Q-tip and the paper is that one of the things you got to be careful about is you don't want to just keep going in and painting over wet paper. If you go in and you keep repeating and adding more and more layers of coffee on top of wet paper, what happens is that the paper will kind of ball up and start to kind of peel off. So you want to make sure that when you do paint this, you kind of paint a layer and you just let it dry. If you keep going back over wet paper with more coffee over and over again, you're probably going to either poke through the paper or actually start causing the paper to kind of peel up. So just put the coffee down and then let it go. Okay. Now, as you guys can see, kind of show you these two. So this one is looking darker than that one. The reason why is because the coffee is actually going to look darker when it's wet. When it dries a little bit lighter. So, but this coffee that I'm using right here, this is my dark one. Again, the longer that the coffee grounds sit inside of the this sort of mixture that I have, the darker it's going to get. So the longer it sits here, darker it's going to get. Okay. So chances are that might even still end up a little bit darker, which is fine because I'm actually, what my plan is, and this is a little experiment that I did, and I'll talk about what all of these marks are on here later. But this right here is one layer of the coffee wash, and then I let it dry. That's the trick here. I let it dry completely, And then I went over with a second layer of the same wash over top of it. And then because now I have 2 layers, it made it darker. But the trick is you have to let it dry in between those layers, because again, if you go and you keep adding more and more layers on top of wet paper, you're just going to break through the paper. Okay. So my plan is, now that I have this, okay, I'm going to go back through with my Q-tip. Okay, I'm going to go through with my Q-tip, and I'm going to go over, I'm going to make all of these back petals darker by adding a second layer on them. And then I'm going to pick parts of my shoe, and I'm going to add a second layer of coffee onto those to make those even darker too, to give it more variation. Okay, my goal in all of this is to end up with not necessarily, I would say, 5 different values, but I want to have 5 different looks. So whether that would be color or the coffee, that's what I'm going for. And if you guys remember, got to think back to our remote learning self-portrait project, we learned how to make different values with just a regular pencil. So this was done with just a regular pencil. I'm going to zoom into this. You guys learned on that self-portrait unit how to create 5 different values with just one pencil. Okay, so it's kind of along that lines, is we want to have 5 different looks. Okay, so even if you don't have access to painting with coffee, or if you don't have a Q-tip, your next option is to actually just use a pencil and at least include 5 different values on there. Okay. Now my hope is, I would really like to see you guys give this a try. Let me zoom back out here. Oh, wrong way. Zoom back out. All right. I really, really would like to see you guys try this coffee trick. Most people have coffee in their house, so hopefully that will work out for you. And, you know, a lot of you guys probably have a Q-tip around the house. Look in your bathroom. But I think coffee, and then my plan is to, and this has to do with this little experiment, is I want to I grabbed whatever we kind of had. Now, obviously, as an art teacher, I have a lot of art supplies around my house. I wanted to pick out supplies that I thought, you know, would be common around. So I grabbed a couple pens, I have a Sharpie marker, a black pen, and I had this red pen sitting around. I'm going to try to find different ways to create different looks, and working on top of both the coffee and the white paper. That would be what I would consider as the second step to this. But I want to get more work done with the coffee first, and then the next step would be, how can I incorporate those into it? Okay, so I'm going to do some more work to this. I'm going to take a picture of it when it's finished with the coffee, and then I'll show you guys what that looks like. And then I'm going to make another video with how to kind of add these items on top. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay, guys, this is Mrs. Gower. I'm here with sort of the next stage of this project. As you can see, I have worked beyond the coffee stain, and I have added quite a few layers since the recording that I did prior to this. So on the coffee, the darker parts, or the darker coffee areas, like you can see, like right here, and then these sections, and then the back sort of section of the petals on the big flowers. What I did with those to make those darker, I actually just kept using the same wash that I did in the beginning, and all that I did to make the areas darker is that I let it dry, and then I painted it another layer on top. So some of these layers, or these areas where you see it really dark, like right here and right here, those have like 3 or 4 layers on them. The trick, which something that I found out, the trick to getting it to really truly get darker is that you have to let the paper dry in between the layers of the coffee. One of the tricks that I use is I actually use like a fan to kind of speed up the drying process. So if you have a fan, you can use a fan. You could also use a hair dryer, but I recommend not using it on like a hot setting, more or less I would use a warm or a cool setting on your hair dryer to dry the paper faster if you're just anxious to keep moving on. But yeah, so if you look right here on this area, like right there, I got that dark. I think there's probably 4 layers of coffee on top of there. So again, I just let it dry in between layers. And then as you can see in this section up here, I have actually started going back and working on top of the coffee. So I'm going to talk about that and talk about how I did that. Now, initially, what I wanted to do was, and this was a little test that I did, and I'm going to zoom into this, turn it this way. So this piece of paper was sort of my test. Okay? This is what artists do. We sort of experiment and test out ideas on scrap piece of paper in our sketchbook before we start doing it on our actual project or artwork, just because we want to see what'll work. And we're trying to figure things out. So it's a lot of just figuring stuff out. So what I did here, and I mentioned this on the prior video, is that I laid down one sort of layer of coffee over this whole strip. I let it dry, and then I painted over a second layer right here to make it darker. After all of this dried, then what I did was I went over and I wanted to kind of work, and just I wanted to see what the pencil, just a regular pencil, would look like on top of the coffee on both the light and the dark. It's a little hard. I think it's kind of glaring a little bit, but you can see that. So I wanted to see what that pencil would look like on top of both light and dark coffee. And then I went over with a pen, and the pen areas are actually right here. So I did the same thing. And when I did the pen work, I just basically was just doing lines like this. And then what I did was, to make it darker, I kind of started a little bit further back, did another sort of direction of lines, and then started a little bit further back of that, added more lines on top, and then just kept going in the same way, just layering more lines and going in different directions. So that's what I did there, because I wanted to see what the pen looked like on top of the coffee. And then this area right here is a Sharpie marker, so just a thin Sharpie marker. And one of the things I noticed was the difference between the pen and the Sharpie is that the Sharpie's color is a little bit different than my ink pen. The ink pen is a little bit of a thinner, finer line, and the Sharpie marker is a little bit thicker. So it's a little difference, not too much, but there you go. And then I did the same thing with a red pen. So I just found this red pen, and that's what I did on those areas. So my thought was I was going to maybe try to use all of these on top of the coffee. So that was my initial idea. But when I got started, I'm going to zoom back out here. When I got started, I kind of liked how it looked without having any of the red on it. Now I'm still not sure if I will, a little bit, yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. I might go in and add some of this later, but right now I kind of like how it's looking just with these things on here. And to be very honest with you guys, I could do this whole thing without even the Sharpie marker. I could do this just with this. Because really, the only difference between the Sharpie marker areas and the pen areas is that it's just thicker. And I could easily just make those areas thicker by just thickening it up with the pen line. So I'm going to zoom into some of this stuff so you guys can see it, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit. Okay. Now, there's nothing to say that, as I work on this and I continue working on it, that I'm not going to go back over. I could go back over with my Q-tip and coffee, and even add more coffee onto this. A lot of what I'm doing right now, my pen is waterproof, so I can go back over top of it with coffee and it won't smear it. Now, it probably will smear the pencil if I do go over those areas. So that's something for me just to consider, but there's always a possibility I'll go back and add more coffee to this. So this corner I've kind of worked on, okay? What I did was, on these flowers, you can see I kind of added some line work or some shapes, added shapes and line work into the petals. And then what I did was, like on these smaller ones, is I just went in and kind of shaded this sort of like a medium value. If you think back to our value scale that we did for the self-portrait medium value, And then when I went in and shaded these areas, I did them lighter. So that's what I did there. I pretty much did all the line work with the pen and the Sharpie. The thicker areas are the Sharpie, but again, I could have very well have done all of that work with just this pen. Shoelaces, so what I did is I outlined those with the Sharpie, and then I went in and I shaded those in with just a light layer of pencil. And then what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to show you guys this, kind of zoom in. I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to add more layers to these shoelaces that are on the bottom of the pile, so to speak, to make them look like they're just further down in that pile. And for like laces like this one, you look this is up and then it goes under. I'm going to make it go darker as it goes in, and then I'm going to keep it lighter here. So I'm going to kind of shade that stuff. So that's stuff that I'm going to do. So anything that I think needs to be darker, I'm going to go in and add another layer of pencil on there just to make it feel like it's further down. And yeah, so anytime it's going down, I'm going to make it darker. When it's going up, I'm going to keep it lighter, just to kind of give it some dimension. So again, when it's going down, make it darker. And when it's going up, I'm going to keep it light. And that should hopefully give this some dimension. Do a little bit more of that. And I know it's kind of hard to see the pencil on the screen because it kind of glares a little bit. I don't know, maybe you can see, yeah, there. See that a little bit better. Lift that up. That's one of the problems with graphite, is that it gets shiny. So again, all I'm doing is taking those parts that are going down and away, and I'm making them darker, and leaving the parts that are coming up, I'm leaving those light. So I can keep going, working on that. And I'll continue that off camera. So that way I don't take up too much of your guys' time. So there's that. Now, oops, wrong way. So if you guys look at this netted area here, so again, this has got about, I drew the netting in pencil first, and then I added the coffee on top, and I did about 4 layers of coffee to get it that dark. I don't know that I can make this get any darker. Maybe after my coffee has soaked for maybe another day with the coffee grounds, it'll get darker, so I could try to do that. So now what I'm going to do, I want the netting to show up a bit more. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over my pencil lines with an ink pen. I'm just using a black ink pen. And I'll be honest with you guys, it's a little hard for me to see these pencil lines because the coffee kind of covered them up a little bit. So some of them are a little hard to see. So I'll do just some of them, and then I'll finish them off camera again. So I'm going to now go over and do the other set of lines to get that netted look. So you guys can see what that, how I do this part. Now, if you do not have like a black ink pen, you can use another color pen. So if you have a blue pen, if all you had was a red pen, then do it in red. I mean, I think, again, the limitations that we are dealing with right now could be a positive and could cause you to get even so much more creative with your materials than if you had access to everything. And it might make everything look better. So I think this could be a really cool positive. So that's what that looks like. Okay, I'll finish that off again off camera. I've got over here this toe area. So what I did is I drew where I saw sort of the thickness of the material, try to show both of these areas. I want to find a way to kind of highlight that or to kind of bring that out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use my pencil, and I'm going to shade those areas in to kind of make these edges feel like they're sort of in shadow. So I'm going to do that there. And then I'm going to do this here. And again, I'm shading with my pencil right on top of that coffee. But the coffee will kind of still, it will still show through. And I even made on this, and I don't know if it translates really well on camera, I made the top a little bit lighter and I made the side here a bit darker to hopefully make that bend look a little bit better. The other thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to play around with line variation. Now this is something that you guys dealt with in Fine Art 1 on your contour drawing. So either you drew a shoe or you drew your hand. You want to remember that you want to keep the lines that are in the back, and so that's this area right here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more so you guys can see. So the areas of the shoe that are here in the back are going to stay thin. So just a single thickness of marker, pen, whatever you're using. So I keep that all thin. But as the shoe moves forward, so as you get to the front of the shoe, these lines should get thicker, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate that here on the shoelaces. I'm going to zoom in. So if you look at this section right here, so again, this is in the back, this is in the front. If it's in the front, it should have thicker lines. So I'm going to leave this part back here, leave it the way that it is right now. And then I'm going to start about in the middle, and I'm going to actually start right on top of the line. So just right on top. And then as I move forward, I'm going to thicken that up. So again, start on top of the line and then just kind of work my way on the outside to thicken up that line. So there you go. I'm going to do that here with these other two just so you guys can see that again. So again, I'm going to leave the lines, the thickness of the line the way it is here in the back, because again, that's farther away in the back of the shoe. And then as that shoelace comes forward, I'm going to make that line thicker. So again, I'm going to start in the middle and thicken it up towards the front. Thicker, thicker, thicker. So that line again needs to get thicker, thicker, thickest as it moves forward. So again, here's this section right here. This is in the back. That's the middle. This is the front. I'm going to leave the back the way that it is. I can't really technically start in the middle because there's another shoelace on top. So I just need to go straight into making this thicker. Okay. I'll do this here. So keep this thin. Start in the middle. Make it thicker towards the front. And there you go, okay? Same thing with this part here. So again, this is in the back. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to start about in the middle, right here. Make that thicker, and I need to make this all thicker here. Because again, that's all in the front. This is really going to give your shoe a lot of pop. And it's going to make it look three-dimensional. Okay, so you can see how I'm doing that. So obviously I have a lot of work still left to do. Hey guys, my hover cam kind of froze on me, so that's why I got cut off there at the end of that video. But here is a picture of my project at that point. And then here's a close-up just to show you a little bit more detail on line variation and some of the shading that I was doing with the pencil on top of white paper and on top of the coffee section. So I wanted to show you that before I cut this video off. So if you guys have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to email me your questions. I'm really excited to see what you guys create on this, because I think with these limitations we have, I think this is where you're really going to shine. So take care, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.